We continue now at the top of Daf Nun Aleph Amud Aleph in Meseches Kiddushin. This is Kiddushin Daf 51a. On the previous Amud, the Mishnah said that if a person is Mekadesh two sisters at once, that it's not going to be a good Kiddushin. And Rav explained what's the source of the Mishnah. The source of the Mishnah is that anytime something does not work sequentially, if he would be Mekadesh one sister and then try to be Mekadesh the second sister, that would not be a good Kiddushin. So Kol She'eno Bazeh Charzeh, anything that doesn't work sequentially, it's also not going to work Bevas Achas, it's also not going to work if you try to do it at the same time. That's what Rabbah teaches, and Rava says that's the explanation of our Mishnah, Kol she'eno bazeh charzeh, afilu bevas achas eino. And the Gemara now asks a question on Rabbah from the Tosefta. The Tosefta says, Hamirabah b'maiser, let's say a person gives maiser, but he gives more than he's supposed to give. He's supposed to give 1/10 in terms of maiser, 10%. Instead he gives 20%. So peiros of misukanim, so the fruits that he took the maiser off of, so those fruits are actually fixed. It's considered that they're no longer tevel. You took off maiser. However, maiseros mikokolin, but the maiser itself, that's already spoiled. We have no idea what to identify, what part is tevel and what part is maiser. And the Gemara says, V'amai, now why should it be that if he takes off 20%, so that other 80% is fixed? Name a kol she'eno bazeh charzeh. We should say that anytime something does not work in sequence, afilu bevas achas eino, it doesn't work even if it's done at the same time. Meaning to say, if the person would separate meiser, and then he would separate meiser again, so the second separation of meiser would be nothing, it wouldn't count. And so therefore, if he's trying to separate the two at the same time, he's trying to separate 20% at the same time, it shouldn't take effect at all. And that other 80% which he's trying to fix, it should not actually be fixed. It should also be considered tevel. And the Gemara answers, Amar Lei said to him, Shani Meiser, it's different when it comes to Meiser, the Isei L'chatzoim, because when it comes to Meiser, it can be done halfway, meaning to say, the Yamar Tiskadesh Palga, let's say a person says, Tiskadesh Palga de Chitza, that half of this Chitza, half of this wheat should be considered, Tiskadesh should be considered Meiser, so Kitcha, that actually would take effect. In other words, it's possible to say that this piece of wheat, half of it will be Meiser, and half of it will not, and since that is possible, so also Bevas Achas, if a person does it Bevas Achas, it's possible to say that you have Meiser and Tevel that are all mixed up. And Rashi explains, Dimamar Tiskadish Palga de Chitza Kitcha, if a person says that half of the wheat should be holy, so half of the wheat is holy, Hilkach therefore Keshehifresh Bevas Achas Yoser Mikashir, when he separates at one moment more than the amount, more than the 10%, Yeshlo Lemaiser Lochel Al Kolchita Vechita Lefi Cheshbon, so the Meiser is Chal on every single piece of wheat according to that proportion, V'ikol Lememar Dinispesu Kulu Lefi Cheshbon, you can say that everything it takes effect, Lefi Cheshbon according to the proportion. Again, the proper amount will be Meiser, and the rest you'll have mixed up will be Tevel. Avol Gabe Achoyes, but when it comes to the case of the sisters, Leko Lememar Nispesu Ketzas Kiddushin Akol Chada V'Chada. It wouldn't be possible to say that there should be a partial Kiddushin on each sister. Of course, that's not going to work, and that's why the Kiddushin is not Chal at all. And the Gemara continues and asks another question on Rabbah, V'harei Meiser Behema, what about by Meiser Behema? The Lecha Lechatzoin V'Leka Bazeh Charzeh, that's something that can't work halfway, and it can't work sequentially. And Rashi explains the lekol lechatzoin, meaning keshemona tisha. Let's say he's counting the ninth animal. Eino yochel lahotzi shnayim. After the ninth animal, he can't say I'm going to take out two animals. V'lomar chatzi kol echad yehei meiser, and say half of each animal is going to be meiser. V'yikrav lechatzoin, and then bring them half. He can't do that. V'lesanami bazeh charzeh. You also don't have sequentially, meaning she'achar shekar la'asiri asiri. Let's say the 10th animal that comes out, he calls that the 10th animal. That's the meiser behema. And then chazar v'kar la'achar asur asiri. Then he counts the 11th one, he says that's also the 10th one. Eino Kaddish, it will not be holy, it's not going to be Meiser Behema. So you don't have a concept of Chatzoin, you don't have a concept of Zechar Zeh by Meiser. V'yomar Rav, and Rav says, some have the gears of Rabbah. Rabbah says, Yotzu Shnayim Bo Asiri, let's say two animals come out at the same time as number 10. V'karan Asiri, and you call it number 10. Asiri, V'acharasar Muravim Zeh Bazeh, you have the number 10 and the number 11, they're mixed up, you can't identify which one is the Meiser Behema. And so the question is, again, if it doesn't work sequentially, it shouldn't work bevas achas. Neither one should be the Meiser Behema. And the Gemara says, Shani Meiser Behema, it's different by Meiser Behema, to Isei Betos, because if a mistake would be made, it could be Kadosh. The Tanan, as we learned in a Mishnah, Kara La Tashi Asiri, if he calls number 9, number 10, V'lo Asiri Tashi, and then he calls number 10, number 9, Ula Achar Asar Asiri, then he calls number 11, number 10, Shloshtan Mekudoshos, all three of them will be Shloshtan Mekudoshin, all three of them will be holy, meaning to say you called the 9th the 10th, so that's going to be considered Meiser Behema because he called it the 10th. The 10th was called the 9th, but it actually was the 10th, so that's also going to have the status of Meiser Behema of Kedusha. And the 11th, that was called the 10th after you call the 10th the 9th, you then call the 11th the 10th. So that also has the status of Meiser Behema. They're all Mekudashin, and therefore, since you see that in a mistake, it could be Chal. That's why if it happens B'vasachas as well, then you have Asiri Ve'achad Asar Me'uravim Zeh Bozeh. And the Gemara continues with another question on Rabbah Harei Toda. What about by the carbon Toda? They would bring 40 chalos, they would bring 40 loaves together with the carbon. The lesa betos v'lesa nami b'zachar zeh. That's not chal. Let's say you have a mistake over there, and also sequentially it's not going to work. V'yitzmar, and yet we learned as follows. This is a machlokas amoraim. Toda shenishchita al shemonim chalos. Let's say you slaughter a carbon Toda, and it's not 40 chalos, but instead you bring 80 chalos. Chizki Yomar, Chizkiya says, Kadshi lo arboim. You say that 40 among the 80 are holy. So apparently something is chal. The Kedusha is chal. We can't identify which 40 loaves, but the 40 loaves of the 80 are definitely considered to have the status of Kedusha. Rabbi Yochanan says, Lo kadshi lo arboim mitoch shemonim. The 40 among the 80, they do not have that Kedusha. They are not holy. And so you see a machlokas amoroim here exactly in this situation, bevasa achas, and it seems according to Chizkiya that it is chal. And the Gemara says to that, Lavitmar Allah, wasn't it learned on this case, Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, that Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi said, he explained it as follows. Hakol modim, everybody agrees. Kol echad amar kadshi lo arboim mitoch shmonim. If the person explicitly says that I want to make holy 40 among the 80, so kadshi, so in that case it actually will have kedusha. And if he says lo yikdashu arboim elim kain kadshi shmonim, if he says I don't want 40 to be holy unless all 80 are holy, so lo kadshi, everybody agrees it doesn't have kedusha. So what's the whole machlokus over here? Lo nechlaku el b'stam. The machlokus is, let's say the person just says stam that they have kedusha, he doesn't explain what he means, and so there's a machlokus, what exactly does he mean? Mar Savar, one master holds la'achrayas kamechav, and all he means is achrayas, meaning to say, let's say 40 of them they get lost, so he's saying I'm separating 80 just in case 40 of them I'm not able to use them, then I'm going to use the other 40. In that case we say, kadshi arboim mitoch shmonim, we say yes, 40 among the 80 will have the kedusha, and that's why it's going to be effective. That's what Chizkiya says. Everybody agrees that if the person is separating an extra 40 for achrayas purposes, just in case something happens to the first 40, everybody agrees that works. And Chizkiya is saying if you do it stam, that's exactly what you mean. Umar Savar, and the other master holds, meaning Rabbi Yochanan holds, lekarbon gadol kamachavin. The person actually wants to bring a big carbon. He wants 80 of the loaves to have the kedusha, and that's not possible. That's why it's not chal. And the Gemara continues, V'Rava lama le l'shanuya karabba. Now Rava was explaining why is it in the Mishnah that if a person is mekadesh two sisters, the kiddushin is not chal. So he explains like Rava that anything that doesn't work sequentially doesn't work if it's at the same time. Kol she'eno b'zachar zeh afilu b'vasachas eino. Why does he need to use Rava? Teipaglei should give a different answer. He should say kiddushin she'en misurin l'biyaninu, that this is a situation of kiddushin where you won't be able to have relations in this case because that would be prohibited, and therefore anytime you have kiddushin that's not, you can't have bia, it's not a good kiddushin. That's what he should have said. And the Gemara answers to that, Lidvar of the Rami Bar Chama Kamar. He was responding to what Rami Bar Chama said. Rami Bar Chama learned the halacha of our Mishnah from a pasuk, and Rava responded and said the pasuk is not talking about bevasachas. The pasuk is talking about bazachar zeh. And according to you, if you want to learn it from that source, the way to learn it is to say anytime something doesn't work bazachar zeh, it also doesn't work bevasachas. But that was what he answered according to Rami Bar Chama. But he could have said that it's kiddushin shein misurin labia, and that's why it's not a good kiddushin. And Rashi explains, V'harei Toda, what about what we find by carbon Toda, meaning again, as we said, Lachmei Toda, the breads of the carbon Toda. The Gemara said, the lesnu betos, it doesn't work by mistake. What does that mean? Shem shacha toda al arboim chalos, let's say a person shechs a carbon Toda on 40 chalos, v'neskavin l'shchoros v'nimsu levanos, he thinks he's talking about the black ones, it ends up he's talking about the white ones, she'enon osen shebedaito, meaning to say, it wasn't the ones that he had in mind, lo kidshu. That's not going to have the holiness, it's not going to be considered to have the kedusha of the lachmei Toda. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, hektish tos, beishamai omrim hektish, u'beis hillel omrim no hektish. Beishamai say, if you have hektish that you did by mistake, it is hektish. However, Beis Hillel says it's not hektish, so we know the lachmei Toda, if it's by mistake, it's not going to have the kedusha. And furthermore, v'lesnu b'zachar zeh, also by the lachmei Toda, it's not going to work sequentially, meaning shem shachta al arboim chalos, let's say he shechts the animal on 40 chalos, v'chazer v'yomar al arboim acheros yikdashu gam elu, and then he says on another 40, they also should have the kedusha im elu together with these other ones, lo kitchu, those second 40 will not have any kedusha. Sha'atoda tu'una arboim chalos, the carbon Toda requires 40 chalos, Again, here, if he's trying to add another 40, it's not going to have the Kiddushin. So the Gemara went on to ask from the Korban Toda, it seemed like there's a machlokas amoroim by the Lachmei Toda, by Bevas Achas, whether there will be Kiddusha, by the case of Arboim Mitoch Shmonim. And again, the Gemara went on to say, if the additional 40 are there as achrayus, that's where it's effective, but if you actually try to make all 80 to give them all the Kedusha, it will not take effect. As Rashi explains, meaning to say again, if the person had in mind that only 40 of them should have the Kedusha, and the rest he just brought for achrayus, meaning that if the first ones become lost or tamei, and so then the other ones should be instead of them, again, that is going to be effective to use them as achrayus. And the Gemara continues, Itmar, we have a machlokas amoroim, Kiddushin she'ein mesurin l'biyah, if you have Kiddushin, but it's not possible to have biyah, it's not possible to have an act of relations. Abaya Amar have a Kiddushin. Abaya says that is considered to be a Kiddushin. Rava Amar lo have a Kiddushin. And Rava says that's not considered to be a Kiddushin. Amar Rava says, Barahina asavrali, Barahina explained to me, the pasuk says, Kikach ish isha uva'ala, it says a man takes a woman and has relations with her, Kiddushin ha-mesurin l'biyah have a Kiddushin. We learn from there that only a Kiddushin that can lead to a biyah, only that is a Kiddushin. Kiddushin she'ein mesurin l'biyah, but if it's Kiddushin she'ein mesurin l'biyah, if it can't lead to an act of relations, lo have a Kiddushin, so then it is not a Kiddushin. And the Gemara says, Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, HaMekadesh Isha Uvita, if a person is Mekadesh, a woman and her daughter at the same time, O Isha V'achosa Ka'achas, or a woman and her sister at the same time, Einon Mekudashos, that is not a good Kiddushin. And so the Gemara infers from the Mishnah, Ha'achas me Isha Uvita, let's say the way the person phrases it is, one of you, meaning a mother and daughter, one of the two of you will be a Kiddushin, O me Isha V'achosa, or one of you, meaning from two sisters, one of you two sisters will be Mekudeshes to me. So it sounds like in that case, Mekudeshes, it sounds like in that case that it would be a good Kiddushin. It's only because you're trying to be Mekadesh both of them simultaneously that it's a problem, but if you're only being Mekadesh one of them, you just don't identify which one. It sounds like from our Mishnah that it would be a good Kiddushin. And so the Gemara says, V'amai, now why should that be a good Kiddushin? Kiddushin she'ein mesurin l'biyah ninhu, that should be a Kiddushin that's you're not able to have biyah in that situation, because since you don't know, it's possible this is the woman who you have Kiddushin with, or it's possible this is the sister, or this is the mother, or this is the daughter of the woman you have Kiddushin with. And so therefore it should be a Kiddushin she'ein mesurin l'biyah, and according to Rava, it should not be a good Kiddushin. And so the Gemara says, Tiyufta de Rava is our Mishnah, a refutation of Rava. And the Gemara says, Amar lach Rava will respond to you, v'l'taimech, according to your reasoning, Eima Seifa, look at the end of the very same Mishnah. The end of the Mishnah says, Ma'isa b'chamesh nashim, there was an incident with 5 women, uvehen shtei achayus, and among the 5 women were 2 sisters, v'liket echad kalkola shel te'enim, and one man, he collected a basket of figs, v'shel hen hoisa, it came from their field, v'shel shavias hoisa, and it was of the Shemitah year, v'yomer, and he said, Hare kulchem mekudashos li, all of you are mekudashos to me, bekalkola zu, with this basket. V'yamru chachamim, and the chachamim said, Ein achayos mekudashos, that the sisters, the Kiddushin is not chal in terms of the sisters. And so the Gemara draws an inference from the seif of the Mishnah. Achayos hu de'enon mekudashos, it's only the sisters who don't have Kiddushin. Hanachrios mekudashos, but the other women there is a Kiddushin. And the Gemara says, Hechi dami, what exactly is the case at the end of the Mishnah? If he said all of you, meaning to say he wanted all of them to be mekudashos to him, so kni'at v'chamor, that should be identical to acquire you and the donkey. V'at v'chamor lo kana, and if a person says you and the donkey should acquire, that's not a good kinyan. And Rashi explains, Kniat v'chamorhu, it's like saying that you should acquire and the donkey should acquire. And Rashi explains the case, Nosin matanos l'nolad u'lu'ubra shebimei imo. A person is giving gifts to a nolad, to a regular person, meaning, and also to an uber, to a fetus that's still in the womb. She'eno kona klum. Now a fetus is not able to acquire anything, so in such a situation, gam ha-nolad eno kona. So if you're trying to give the gift, and they're interdependent on each other, in other words, you're giving the gift to the nolad, and you're giving the gift to the uber, you're assuming that both are going to work, and that's how they are going to work, so then we say both of them do not work. Sharei lo hikna lo zeh below zeh, because you're not being makna to this one without this one. They're happening together, and so therefore, since the uber is not kona, so to the nolad is not kona. And so therefore, the same thing should be true by Kiddushin. If you're doing a Kiddushin to all 5 of the women at once, and you're saying they all should be chal, v'hachanami, so we are also, ika chada de lo chazi le klal, you have at least one woman who's not fit at all, because again, you have 2 sisters among the group, and therefore, since the Kiddushin will not work in terms of the 2 sisters, it shouldn't work with anybody. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Nun Aleph Amud Beis.